Welcome back to the Physician's Guide to Doctoring. On this week's episode, we have a guest host. So please be the same respectful audience you are for me and enjoy. Doctors like us have demanding schedules. So growing our portfolio shouldn't be another burden. And the last thing we want when we take off our scrubs is a call from a tenant about an overflowing toilet. So Equity Multiple brings us streamlined access to vetted real estate investments that work for us, even when we're off the clock. And only 5% make the cut. Once we invest, a team of professionals goes to work to maximize our returns. With a minimum investment of just $5,000, diversify outside the stock market with cash flowing CRE like multifamily, industrial self-storage, and more. Welcome to modern real estate investing. Visit equitymultiple.com to learn more. That's equitymultiple.com.
Today's episode is about college student health and well-being, the do's and do-nots, along with practical tips you can implement as a clinician or in life as a physician parent. So listen in.
Hey, this is Brad Block, host of The Physician's Guide to Doctoring. This is a personal and professional development podcast for physicians where we have experts on the show that try to teach us everything we should have been learning while we were memorizing Krebs cycle.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Physician's Guide to Doctoring. I am your host, Dr. Amna Shabbir, and today I have a celebrity guest with us, Dr. Jill Grimes. She is a board-certified family physician and a nationally recognized medical media and college health expert. She is an award-winning author of several books, including her passion project, The Ultimate College Student Health Handbook, your guide for everything from hangovers to homesickness. With over 20 years of experience in private practice and academic medicine, plus 7 years working directly with college students in a busy university health center, Dr. Jill brings a unique blend of real-world medical expertise, evidence-based medicine, and relatable advice for parents and students alike. If you have not yet seen her on LinkedIn and on Instagram and TikTok, you are missing out big time. I followed Jill first on Instagram, and I was just blown away by the wonderfully educational material that she was sharing. And I learned so much. So I'm really excited about today's show. Without further ado, welcome to the show, Jill.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here and talk with everyone.
Thank you. So I would love to learn, and I'm sure our audience would be equally curious, why picking specifically college student well-being and what drove you to this focus? I would love to know a little bit about the journey.
It all began when I was born. My dad was a college professor and administrator. And so as he moved up the ladder in administration, we moved. So I grew up moving every couple of years, and it was always focused on college campuses because my dad was teaching and administrating. And so I grew up sharing the family's passion for college, just college, everything, college excitement, particularly in sports, and not just football, basketball, tennis, you name it. That was our entertainment. And so I always grew up with a love for that. Then I had kids, and my kids grew up. And when their babysitter was going to college, actually, her mom, that's my next door neighbor and dear friend, her mom was like, oh my gosh, Dr. Jill, what is she going to do without you when she has a problem? Can you make her a first aid kit? So I did. And I made this first aid kit that I was very proud of. And I took it over there, and it was so cute, all decorated. I'm like real artsy. And the mom was like, yeah, she doesn't know how to use it. So she pulls out an index card and starts writing down. She's rapid fire asking me, when do you use Tylenol versus Advil? When do you use what cream on a cut? All this kind of stuff. What started off as these little index cards, as I started making these first aid kits for college students as high school graduation gifts, ultimately became a 26-page laminated booklet, and then eventually became this book. And in the process of all that, I had written other books. So before our kids went to college, I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to bundle every single thing I want them to know into a book that they can have in their hands at all times, which I know is silly, but that's the parent in me. And at the same time, the practice that I was working in got sold, and I decided to not go back to that. And I was looking for part-time, and the University of Texas, which I live in Austin, they're frequently looking for people to jump in part-time. And I was able to do that. And I just loved it. I loved the atmosphere. And I've always talked to kids as a parent. I talked in kid groups that were around the ages of our kids. And that as they grew, that age grew. And by the time I wrote this book and everything, my kids were going off to college. And then I was sharing with college students. So I just stopped there because I love that age. And I've just focused on that ever since.
What a powerful story. And I could only imagine if you were my neighbor and I'm going to college and you bring me this amazing first aid kit with everything that you need in it. Like, what a neat way to launch life in college. And so I see all of your posts. You talk about it's everything step by step. So that is wonderful. And honestly, I learned so much. I'm an internist by training, and my subspecialty further is geriatrics now. But when I was practicing primary care, young adults have a very unique set of needs. And all I remember, either the sports physical and those other physicals. But when this transition to college is happening, there's so much going on. So as you look at your physician audience, and first, just from the lens of a physician, what are some of the things that you see we potentially can miss because we know that physicians are overworked, all of us, especially the ones that are practicing in a traditional primary care model. So what are the things that potentially we can miss when we're looking at young adults, we're looking at those college students, and any thoughts surrounding that? I would love to hear.
It's so hard because truly the constraints of time in practice. And I know that all of us are trained to get psychosocial histories and to ask about all the things, but there's just not time for that. And I think it's all the things like asking about, not just asking if they smoke, but weed. And knowing that today THC is not pot. That if you say pot, you're aging yourself, and they're not going to answer that. If they're having weed, if they're having gummies. And the biggest thing is less, I think, the topics and more the tone. My gift is people jokingly call me, you're the teen whisperer, but you have to reach them where they're at, which I know everybody knows. I'm not trying to talk down to anybody, certainly. But for example, if I am talking to a group of young freshmen in college, boys that are pledging a fraternity, okay, frat pledges, and I come in there and I say, you know what, a third of college students don't even drink alcohol. You shouldn't drink alcohol. It's bad. And you're 18, you're not legal. And I'm taking this to an extreme, obviously. But the reality is probably close to 100% of their peer group, and not in every fraternities, and I'm not trying to pick on Greeks, but in that peer group, the vast majority of people drink and they binge drink on weekends. So it's not going to be effective to give them a statistic, even if it's true. I think it's more about changing the way that we talk. What is your experience? What percentage of your friends drink or use weed or are using gummies? You say they're anxious and they're there for insomnia and they can't sleep. So what all have you tried? And they're going to tell you that they've tried Benadryl. They're going to say Benadryl, Tylenol PM, because they don't realize that's just more Benadryl, and maybe NyQuil. And they're generally not going to say, and gummies, or I tried a Xanax that my friend gave me because I'd been up 3 nights studying for Gen Chem and I couldn't sleep. So being able to just ask anything else, and have you tried, with an open tone, open body language of, have you tried gummies? And I think a lot too is what I find from so many of my physician friends. They ask me stuff all the time. They're like, I have no idea. What's the difference in the THC concentration and all that stuff? So some of it is just added to your list of CME, but learning some of those things. So as a clinician, those are the things that I think get missed, is by not going there, not asking some of these things in a non-judgmental tone.
I love that you said that, because the time period we're looking at, yes, there's a lot of anxiety. And I will say a disclaimer that my daughters right now are very young. And the thought of them leaving for college gives me anxiety and sweating and panic already. But this recognition that these young adults are going through a tremendously challenging time where they're leaving home, they're starting their new lives, and the academic pressures that are on them. And I look back at my time, and that was really challenging. You are trying to make something and then on top of that, there are all these societal pressures. I love that you said keeping an open and non-judgmental tone, because that's the only way you're actually going to reach out and connect with them. And also this recognition that we have to have this continuous CME in terms of updating. I'll see one of your Instagram posts and I'm like, I had no idea.
Yeah. And the thing with THC is obviously cannabis is still not legal everywhere. And we don't have a ton of science. And I try and practice evidence-based medicine. And a lot of times when I talk with students, what I share, I lead with, look, I'm 100% biased against it. And here's why. I only see the bad outcomes. And if you lead with that rather than saying, oh my gosh, it's horrible, it does. And I honestly, I think a lot of it is horrible. But again, that's because I see the bad outcomes. And we talk about it being addictive in 1 out of 6 teens, but that means 5 out of 6 teens, it's not addictive. And when you lead with a fact, 1 out of 6 teens gets addicted. They hear, my friends smoke it, use it twice a week, and they're not addicted. So now you're invalidated. So I think that setting is really important. I'd like to address what we as physician parents maybe can do better before our kids launch to help them when they are healthcare adulting. Can we go there for a little bit?
Absolutely, please, because there's a lot in the audience that are listening very cleanly to that.
Yes. So as physician parents, how many of us have sometimes we treat our own kids, although I actually never prescribed anything for my kids. Some people are stricter about that than others, but that I just did not. My best friends in my practice sure did. And we have the luxury of when our kids are sick and we don't know what to do for them, or we don't want to be responsible for what to do with them, we pick up the phone, we text, we call our friend, and we go, hey, can you see them? Our kids get in right away. We go in with them. Most of us go in, and because we got worked in, squeezed in because we asked, we then jump in trying to save our peer time. And we go, okay, sore throat started, here's the fever, here, blah, 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 blah. And we spit out the history and we can rationalize in our brains. We're a couple of things. One, we're role modeling how to tell a proper history to our kid. And 2, we're saving time because we got worked in and we're just trying to be grateful and respectful of their time. But what happens is our kids do not learn how to talk to the doctor. And so starting as young as you can, sit there and bite on your tongue and let the doctor talk to your kid, let your kid answer for themselves as best you can. I am the worst at this. Do as I say, not as I did. So I think that's important. I think having kids, especially in middle school and definitely in high school, they need to start being in charge of their own prescription medications and even vitamins or over-the-counter allergy meds. Say they take Allegra every day or Claritin or Zyrtec or whatever. Because especially with ADHD medications, what do parents do? Right before they walk out the door or with their breakfast, hand it to them. Did you take your medicine? And they've got all this constant reminder and they don't miss it because of all of that. Then they get to college and there's no one there to do that. Or even worse, the helicopter parent is texting them, did you take your medicine? Please, it's time to let them go. And again, not judging, totally understand how this happens. But I think those are things as parents that we need to start encouraging them earlier. Once they can drive, they need to be able to go to the doctor's appointment. And even if you go with them, let them fill out the paperwork with you sitting next to them, teach them how to do that. What's a guarantor? I added a whole chapter on that in my latest edition of my book because physician parents all ask me, they're like, hey, my kid has no idea what's on an insurance card and how to fill this thing out. Those are things that we can do to gradually start shifting the reins over to them.
We have to empower them as early as we can. And I can so relate to what you said in terms of history giving, because I was yesterday in the doctor's office and I took my 5-year-old. I hope that I am one easy patient on your schedule for today. And so I can completely relate with what you shared, and it'd be empowering, and the autonomy giving is so needed. Jill, walk us through the book a little bit. Like, I would like to learn more about it. I know it's very neat. And if it's like anything, all the pearls that you share on your social media, that's wonderful that you have it all scrunched. I think we can get really a lot of value from it as physicians as well, because when you have anxious parent, you have a young adult, maybe something you can recommend where everything is all neatly organized in one place.
Yes, thank you. Actually, I know one of the biggest compliments, it just cracks me up every time, are my physician specialist friends, a retinal specialist, who will text me like, "Oh, just use your book again. We didn't know when they needed a tetanus or didn't know this. Yeah, whatever." And of course, these are the same specialists that I reached out to and got help. I have a lot of specialist input in the book, but basically, it's a head to toe. It's not meant to be a sit down and read it book. It is a head to toe, literally organized head to toe guide, starting with hangovers because it's college students, right? But concussions and migraines, but also brain stuff, test anxiety, insomnia, those kinds of things, and working your way down to strep throat and down to bug bites and stings. Like I said, people are like, oh, a kid's not going to use that. They're probably going to Google it. But also, when you have a headache and you Google it, it says that you have a brain tumor. And then when it's 3 a.m. and you're freaking out, it's nice to have a comfortable reference that you can look at and say, okay, it's probably not a brain tumor. That's what it's designed to be. I also talk about something a lot of parents and physicians alike have strong feelings about tattoos. A lot of 18-year-olds get tattoos. And in some families, it's a hard no. In some families, it's a rite of passage. The question is where and when. But for most, it's less common in parent generation than it is in college student generation right now. And so I just here's the medical risks, which honestly are not many, but here's the things that people regret about tattoos, using a name, by the way, because someone significant in your life may not stay a significant other. So that's a big, and foreign languages, getting the wrong translation, especially Chinese characters. But sometimes it's a matter of location. And one of the things I suggest that so many people are like, oh, light bulb moment, is do temporary tattoos first. There are really good quality temporary tattoos, and get it and live with it and look at it and make sure do you want it where you can read it or where other people can read it? If it's a self-affirmation, a lot of people do stuff on their wrists. And I start with that rather than having, this does not need to be a hill to die on, parents, rather than the absolutely not. Okay, let's have a rational discussion. And maybe we agree as a family that you're going to try different temporary tattoos for 6 months before you make a decision on something that's more permanent. So I try and have practical discussions like that in the book, and everything's short. It's a bathroom book. You can read in one sitting what you're interested in.
Love it. All practical tips. And that's a great perspective of trying something temporary, seeing if it works well for you, and then going for the permanent one following that. You mentioned tattoos. We talked a little bit about hangovers. We talked a little bit about cannabis. Are there any other health issues that are front and center that come to your mind? We're noticing a lot more when we're looking at college student health. Would love to hear your thoughts on that.
I think the big obvious elephant in the room is depression, a topic that is near and dear to you, I know as well. But unfortunately, there are about 1,000 deaths by suicide in college age students every year. And I think bringing awareness to that is huge. Talking about it, kind of a parallel to that is hazing. Last week was National Hazing Prevention Awareness Week. And certainly the numbers of deaths are not as many. It's another thing that's hugely prevalent. But mental health is first, second, third, and fourth on the things that we really need to be addressing in young people. And while there is, I think in the medical profession, I think most of us are pretty comfortable with, yes, this is something we need to talk about. But there's certainly a large percentage of the population, parent age of college students, so like 18 plus 20 and 30 years, that think, oh my gosh, these kids are just way oversharing. Everything is blamed on their anxiety or ADHD or whatever. And I think, we need to be a safe sounding board for that. I think asking about sleep is probably the easiest intro into that, because we all know if you're having significant anxiety and depression, you're not sleep right. I mean, that's the first thing that goes pretty much. And so I think, and people are comfortable, young people are comfortable talking about sleep. No, I can't sleep. No, my brain, I can't shut it off at night. It just won't stop. And then you can start into talking about, are you looking at social media? Are you playing the comparison game? All of those things are a natural lead into that. I think that's the big elephant in the room.
We have to talk about it more. And thank you for doing so, because we have to normalize, we have to destigmatize so that individuals can ask for help. When we're recording this, the National Suicide Prevention Month is over, but that's not where the conversation stops. Talking about mental health, talking about hazing, talking about bullying. And I like how you offered sleep as a gentle segue to open these conversations up so we can actually move forward. You mentioned social media, Jill. Let's talk about social media and college students and your thoughts or insights or tips on that.
I see more and more kids. My godson is a freshman in college. And what I love is when his friends, when they sit down they meet at McDonald's or wherever, they meet for a meal. First thing they do is they all put their phones in their backpacks. They just put them away. They don't have them sitting out. I think sometimes young men are a little better at that than young women, but maybe not. I hope that we just see a general trend of that. And I think we need to role model that for sure. There's so much more awareness now. The social media influencers of college age students that I follow, every single one says all the time, put your phone down, stop looking at this. And that's their job. That's what they're there for. But everyone is trying to send that message of, okay, go out and experience life after you watch my video. It's tough, but I do think people are limiting it. And I love the controls. I don't know if you use a control on your phone. I just aged myself right there. I do that all the time. But I have a time limit on all my social media apps. And so my phone tells me, you got 5 more minutes. And then there's a snooze button. Do you want 15 more minutes? Do you want 1 more minute? And I'm really trying to use that to increase my own awareness of how much time I spend on social media. So that is something that I suggest. And it's so much easier to suggest things when you practice what you preach, right? So that's my latest step, is just encouraging everyone to have those time limits and to delete things. I deleted a game that I've fallen into the habit that many people do of, okay, I'm going to finish this one post or blog or whatever I'm doing, and then I'm going to play my little word game for 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 15 minutes by accident. I'm like, I just got to delete that. I'm addicted to that game, and I'll reach for it every time. And then one day I didn't miss it. It's interesting. If it's there, you're going to use it. So just increasing awareness and role modeling.
Role modeling is excellent, because leading by action, I think that's the most powerful step that you can, because they're going to see what you're trying to embody and wanting them to do. I love creating awareness, and I have also set those alerts on my phone. It prompts me to put it away. And yes, absolutely. We are just so overstimulated as a society that whatever we can remove, we absolutely should remove. And we talked about the impact of perfectionism. Sometimes I like to really bring that in, because if we can allow our college students to feel imperfect and know that's okay, I think that would be a huge service. So that is something I really want to underscore, because looking back at my life, I feel that there was this absolute yearning for flawlessness, and that was perpetuated by personal and societal standards. So creating that enoughness, as we talk about academic pressures or the way you look, the way all these other things that you're doing,
Right.
I think that is also something I have very strong personal thoughts on. Love to hear your thoughts on perfectionism and young adults.
I literally put on my story yesterday on Instagram, shared from somebody else. It was a little sticky note, and it said, your grades do not equal your worth. Here's the problem. How do you say that to a pre-med student? And I talk about 1C is not going to keep you out of medical school, not your freshman year. And it might keep you out of a medical school. If you really want to be a doctor, people screw up their freshman year. I had a young man that I mentor that I'm so proud of, and he just he's in medical school now with a full ride, which is amazing. And he was the man of his family. He had multiple jobs, first gen, and he had big responsibilities his freshman year, including a job at Walmart. And how he even managed to do college with all of that at a big university and everything. But he had a 3.0, which anyone else would be like, oh yeah, 3.0 is great. But we all know for pre-med, that's okay, forget it. And I'm going to medical school. Well, and he did much better and did very well, but he had to get a master's. It was not a straight through to get in. But I don't know how we can honestly talk about not worrying about perfectionism with grades with pre-meds. It's a problem. other than what I say, but I would love a better solution. I don't have one, but I do definitely, I encourage people to look at the big picture, and more people are doing gap years between undergrad and med school. And I think those gap years make a difference. A lot of people are getting masters in their year to up their grades and such, but also life experiences, Peace Corps, just working. It doesn't have to be saving the entire world. It can be working as a medical scribe or getting those different experiences. But I definitely try and focus on some of that when I'm talking with pre-meds. But the plus of outside of that, certainly there are other majors that are equally competitive, but most of them have less emphasis on the grades. I have a daughter who's in animation, frankly. She did well. She actually did very well. She graduated magna cum laude. But really, people who are employing animators, they don't actually care what her grades were. They care what her reel. They need to see her work. And I think there could have been less pressure on her. And using her as an example, because I know she doesn't mind me sharing this, she's the illustrator of the book, by the way. So that's
wonderful.
But got a big scholarship to where she went to school. And part of the scholarship was enrollment in their honors program. And I remember asking her, I'm like, do you want to do the honors program? I mean, she's super smart and really great in math and science, but she hates writing. She is not a sit down and write papers. And it's better professors, and she spent a day there. And she was super fired up till midway through her freshman year. She had 9 papers due in her 5 classes. And guess what? It did not go well. And I said, you can drop out of the honors program. Oh, no, I can't do that. I'm like, yeah, actually, you can. And she's like, really? And she did. And you know what? She excelled the rest of the time. She didn't need to be in there. So I share this, parents, because in our physician audience, just 1 or 2 of us is a little type A, self-disclosure. And sometimes we project that on our kids. And so I share that because it really took me taking a ginormous step back. Less so my husband, who is also a physician. He was like, whatever. But it took me longer to accept that she didn't need to be in the honors program. So there you go.
Thank you for sharing that, because that is how we actually address it. It's one of the ways as we model, we openly talk about it, that this is a problem, and we have to talk about it because perfectionism is one of the leading causes towards people taking their own lives. And
Yes.
so it's an important factor. As a physician parent, you model that. It's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. I am a byproduct of a dual physician household as well. So we try not to pass that along to my littles. Jill, as we wrap up for today, this has been so fabulous, everything that you've shared. What are the biggest takeaways you would like to say as we wrap up for today?
I think what I would like to say is, since my focus is teens and young adults, to try and be as open as you can with your conversations. Try not to have fishing expedition conversations. Are you using pot? As an open conversation, or not to be self-promoting, but use my book. Like, read a chapter in there. Say, hey, did you know this? Especially if it's something like they want to get an ear pierced, but they want to do a cartilage piercing. And just talking about the medical risks of that and keeping that tone just, oh, okay, did you know that this percent gets infected and it's a bigger deal if those are infected, and lobe piercings are less risky? And just to be able to have those conversations, let them know that it's okay to fail. It's okay to talk to you about it. It's okay to change course, and just that we're there for them.
Oh, that was beautiful. Jill, how can folks get in touch with you, learn more about you, and absolutely get the book?
My website is just jillgrimesmd.com. I'm not so active on Twitter, X anymore, but it's Jill Grimes MD. On Instagram, Jill Grimes MD. And on TikTok, for those of you who are over there, I'm the TikTok.collegedoc.
Wonderful. And we will have all these links in the show notes for the audience. And if you are not following Jill on social media, please do. She is such a fabulous resource for all of us. Thank you so much for your time, Jill.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks for listening. I have a favor to ask. You listened to the episode until the end, which means you either fell asleep or you really liked the episode. So please share it, or like it, or comment on a social media post, or write us a 5-star review. Something. It would really help me out. And maybe what you learned from this episode can help someone else too. The views expressed in this episode are those of the interviewer and interviewee, and don't represent the views of their employer or even their significant other. Even though the magic of podcasting make it sound like I'm talking directly to you, this is not a doctor-patient relationship, and this is not medical advice or financial advice or really any advice. Thank us again for listening to The Physician's Guide to Doctoring.